Welcome to our first non-audio drama video. We want this channel to be a catch-all for everything in the Magic universe, which is why I'm going to be doing prediction videos, unboxings, and lore deep dives on top of our audio dramas. Now, we are hard at work on our second audio drama, and we'll be posting that on the first Thursday of September. We're taking some incredible notes from you guys and making it the best that we can, which is why it's not going to be out this Thursday, but next Thursday. But without further ado, let's talk Throne of Eldraine predictions. From the moment this set was announced, I was on the hype train. A court, a throne, fairies, and a personal invitation to myself. My mind was going wild with theories. Maybe we're finally going back to Lorwyn, which, if we're being honest, kind of are. It's a different plane entirely, but when you really look at it, it's a fairy tale inspired plane, basically Lorwyn 2.0. Maybe this set will bring back old planeswalkers, and once again, as things came out, found out, hey, sure enough, they are. Rowan's coming back. That's interesting. Maybe this set was going to be set in the underworld of Theros. I really wanted that, because my favorite planeswalker is Elspeth, and currently she's trapped. But I'll just wait till January set. We're going back to Theros. I hope. In any case, this video is broken up into 3 different parts. First is my top 10 predictions, going from pretty certain because of what people have alluded to the most absolutely ridiculous thoughts I could put down on paper. The second section of this video will be deep dives into the art they gave us without any context, and my predictions as to the color, abilities, and possibly even the lore ideas that I can gather just from the art alone. And finally, the third part is going to be a small segment of the most absolutely insane ideas I could think up for this set. I know I'm going to get my hopes up for some of those things, but hey, that's what predictions are all about. Getting your hopes up and having them completely dashed when the set comes out, but still being really impressed with the set. After the set is out, I will be doing a video revisiting my theories and seeing how correct I was on a scale of 1 to, oh boy, this guy must be a planeswalker and he can see into the future. So without me rambling further like the maniac that I absolutely am, let's get into our
Top 10.
Number 10. Throne of Eldraine will include deep dives into fairy tales. Now, when Mark Rosewater first came out and described the set, he said that it was Grimm's fairy tales meets Camelot. Thus, we know 2 things. First, they're going to be diving in to the pantheon of Grimm's fairy tales that are out there. Over the time that the Grimm's fairy tales were being collected, more than 200 different stories were put into their collections, only a few of them actually written by the Brothers Grimm. But on top of that massive collection of different stories, they're also pulling from Arthurian legend, which is more of a by-mouth mythos that has seeped into popular culture through movies, books, and even history? Yes, there's a lot of historical precedent for the Arthurian legend, at least being based on some aspects of real-life history. Now, there wasn't an actual king who went to a lake and met a weird fish lady who gave him a sword and made him king while sending him on a quest to go and find the Holy Grail and bring him back to make him king. And then Arthur decided that he didn't want to be king, so he shoved his sword into a stone, and then eventually a group rose up to try to take over, and then he went and said, no, I'm truthfully the king, and he pulled Excalibur from the stone. All of that is interesting, but the pieces that are actually from history seem to be the Round Table, Arthur himself possibly being a person who existed, and a couple of the stories may have been true. But in saying that, we have almost 1100 years of this mythos being in existence to pull from. and so many different variations and takes on the Arthurian legend. So between the two, my prediction for this part is that they're going to go so deep that it's going to be hard to find some of these characters.
Number 9.
For my second prediction, I looked at some of the artwork and started to make a bit of a connection. I believe that there will be a gender-swapped version of the story of King Arthur. Now, I'll get into this more in my predictions for the art at the end of the video, but I think there's at least some sort of precedent for the Arthurian legend being gender-swapped.
Number 8.
One of the most interesting things that came out when this set was first announced was 2 different versions of the same card depicting Goldilocks and the 3 bears. On this card, there was a new mechanic that was not explained. All we saw was its cost and a blank space, which allowed me to make a prediction on it. So what is this mechanic? Well, I've been calling it the storybook mechanic. It's not an official name that I know of, but it's what I've been calling it. And I believe that this mechanic will be completely broken. This mechanic will be similar to Saga's, but an updated version. Being that Dominaria is moving out, we need something to replace Saga's. So what it will be is a card that starts out innocuous, but will grow more powerful over time. Similar to leveling up, but fairly different. For the Goldilocks cards, I believe that there can be 2 different ways this mechanic could work. She comes out as a 1/2 card for 1 forest mana. Once on the field, and after the summoning sickness wears off, she can use 1 forest mana and 6 other mana to do some sort of effect. I believe that this could be one of 2 different effects which would represent her story. In Goldilocks and the 3 bears, there's a consistent this is bad, but this is good idea. Likewise, the card could give a -2/-2 counter to a random creature, the enemy loses 2 life, and then you gain 3 life. This would match the story and would allow a fairly bad card to be a bit better. The other option would be to call out 3 2/2 bear creature tokens in order to represent the 3 bears that are clearly dead in both of her card looks. Either of these options would match the story of the card and would be a cool addition to a low-cost 1/2 card.
Number 7.
I believe that they will be introducing 3 new mechanics into this set. They will include the storybook mechanic and 2 others. The first mechanic is something that I like to call chivalry. Now, this is something that I came up with. It might not be in the game at all, but it's a cool idea, and I think Wizards of the Coast could use it in the future if it's not in this set. The way chivalry would work would be that the creature would be able to sacrifice itself at any time in order to null any sort of damage that is incoming. Now, this would be completely unbalanced unless it was put on one of 2 different types of cards. One, a low-cost card that you could put out for 1 or 2 mana that would have high attack and defense but have the chivalry on it, or a high-cost, low card that you could put out. Both of these would make this a little bit more balanced and allow you to have just this new sort of damage protection that hasn't been seen before that I know of.
Number 6.
The other mechanic is also completely new that I know of. This is what I call Excalibur. Cards with this mechanic may have the ability to pull out any equipment card for an extra mana cost. These bits of equipment would have to be weapon cards, which I believe would be a cool specific type of equipment artifacts, but I'm not going to make a prediction on that. These cards would be able to search for and automatically equip these artifacts, with the downside that they would be tapped for that turn. However, the next turn, they would be even more powerful than they were the turn before. Number 5. This one's a bit of a downer. I believe that Wizards of the Coast is going to get some of the stories completely wrong. The reason why? Well, Disney exists. But Disney's stories aren't bad. They're unique retellings in order to make them kid-friendly. A lot of Grimm's fairy tales are extremely dark, which makes them fairly hard to adapt into most mediums. Now, Wizards of the Coast is also fairly dark, so I believe they're gonna go there for many of the cards. But I think for some of the cards, they're gonna shy away and do some things that are more bent towards the Disney versions. And we can already see this in the Cinderella card that has been shown. Numbers 4, 3, and 2. I couldn't figure out how to separate numbers 4, 3, and 2, so you're getting them all at once. I believe that this is going to be a larger set as they are trying to put a lot into it. They're trying to match Magic the Gathering, Grimm's Fairy Tales, Camelot, and other folk stories into one full set. I believe that there are going to be over 250 cards total, with 4 or even 6 Planeswalkers, including Planeswalker decks. One of these is going to be Rowan because we've already seen her, but the other is a mystery Planeswalker who could be Garruk. Now, hear me out. Rowan's artwork very clearly resembles Little Red Riding Hood, which would allow for 2 options for another Planeswalker who would match the story and also bring many people to this set. The first option would be Garruk as the Huntsman, a character who, in this retelling of the story, would be helping the wolf to hunt Rowan. The other option, which is also plausible but I think less likely, would be for Arlen Cord to be the other Planeswalkers. She would be the wolf in this story. Both of these options are purely speculation, but they would be fun, would match the storytelling, and also bring a couple of characters that we haven't seen in a while back for this set. I also believe that there will be another 16 mythics. Many of these will be legendary creatures, but there will be 5 cards, one for each color, which will be legendary lands. They've done legendary lands before, but I think it would be interesting if they did legendary lands based within the world of Eldraine that specifically had the storyteller mechanic on it. This mechanic would allow them to pull out a creature card that would match that story. And when I get into the art aspect of this video, you'll see that there are a couple that I can already pinpoint as being these legendary lands. There's also been the recent leak of the first chapter of the Wildered Quest, in which it mentions that there are 5 different places within the realm of Eldraine. I truthfully believe that there will be 5 legendary lands with the storybook mechanic on them. The rest of the cards in this set will be rares, uncommons, and commons, but a lot of them will have the storybook mechanic on them. I believe everything from common to mythic will have a storybook mechanic. That way you could fit any sort of card with this mechanic into your deck.
Number 1.
Finally, my most insane idea, a token with a storybook mechanic. I know it's completely implausible, it's never gonna happen, but I haven't been able to get this idea out of my head, and so here it is as number 1 on my top 10 list of the most insane predictions that I could think of. Oh wait, no, this is the first part of the video. These are my predictions for what I think are going to happen in the set, and I honestly believe that they might do a new type of token. Whether it's a token that actually has the storybook mechanic on it, or just a token that does something new. Either way, we're going to see a new type of token in this set. And now, for something entirely different. For the next section of this video, I want to go through and talk about the art predictions that I have. For Throne of Eldraine, Wizards of the Coast came out and showed us a couple of pieces of art from the community that are going to be included on some of the cards. And so I said, I'm going to take this as a challenge. I'm going to take these artworks and I'm going to make cards out of them. And I regretted it. So I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to go into the art and try to figure out which story each of these cards are from. This art is by Jason Rainville. When I first looked at this art, I had two thoughts. First, this could be referencing the French story of Beauty and the Beast, and second, this could be Mother Gothel looking into the tower that she keeps Rapunzel. There doesn't seem to be one answer, but what do I think this card will do? Well, I could see it as a draw land card, or an enchantment that makes using the storybook mechanic easier. Either way, a powerful card to start off this section. And if that card was referencing Mother Gothel, then this second card also references the story of Rapunzel. The image depicts her longing to escape. This is probably a creature card, and this is where my speculation begins to go wild. I also believe this could be an image of Guinevere, mixing the two characters into one story. The circles throughout her outfit point towards this, and the fact that Guinevere has red hair in many different versions of the story. However, if my prediction about the gender-swapped King Arthur story is true, then this may not be true unless they make the story LGBTQ on top of everything else. In the end, I think this is just Rapunzel. The plains in the background are eerily reminiscent of the plains from Kaladesh, meaning that Eldraine may be a plane connected to other planes, almost like a subplane accessible through storybooks. What does this card do? It's a low cost, low attack and defense, but with 4 life gain. The third piece of art is honestly one of my favorite. A bunch of swords and weapons being surrounded by flames and lightning, with some amazing woman standing in the center of them, seemingly causing all of the mayhem. I honestly cannot pinpoint what story this is from, but I think that this card could be a mountain, called something like Reign of Swords or Call to Arms. And honestly, I believe that this is just the typical damage card. Deal 5 damage to any target. It may also be a calling card, but I don't think so. When I looked at the fourth piece of art, I thought, like many people did, that it might be referencing the Knights of the Round Table. And that seems to be a good option. However, as I started to look into Grimm's fairy tales, I believe I found something that may match it just a little bit closer. There is a Grimm's fairy tale called How 6 Made Their Way in the World. The story, which takes place within the real world, is about a man who gets swindled out of money for being in the military. He meets 5 people who have extraordinary abilities, and he plots a way to get back at the king. The 5 are an extremely strong man, a speedster who took off one of his legs to slow him down, a man who causes a frost unless his hat is crooked and covering one ear, a sharpshooter, and a man with a huge gust of wind in his breath. The king puts on a foot race, and the speedster enters for the ex-soldier. The challenge was to fill a pitcher with water and make it back to the king. The speedster goes a lot quicker than the other runner, who was the king's daughter, and fills his pitcher, but gets tired and decides to take a nap. The daughter tips over his pitcher, and the sharpshooter, who is watching from a distance, wakes the runner up. He refills the pitcher and wins the race. But the king doesn't want his daughter to be married to the ex-soldier, so he lures all of the men in and tries to kill them by lighting a fire under them. And here's where I get to the card. The floor is made of iron, and the man who creates frost tips his hat to protect them from the fire. This matches the image in a few ways. Firstly, the floor is iron or some sort of metal. Second, there seems to be a charred area in the center of the circle. Third, there appears to be some sort of flame or frost in between their swords. And fourth, there are 5 men that are causing this effect to happen. It is possible that this is what the card is referencing, but I should conclude the story. After they escape the flames, the king is worried about what they can do, so he decides to try and bribe the ex-soldier not to marry his daughter. The soldier agrees as long as he gets enough money that his servants can carry. The strong man takes all of the king's riches in his arms, and they begin to escape. As they are leaving, the king changes his mind and sends his soldiers after the ex-soldier to try to kill him. But the man who can blow gusts of wind blows the king's soldiers away, and they are able to live out their lives in happiness and richness. After all of that story, what is this card? Well, I think it's a bit of a bolster card, giving a creature or a group of creatures +1/+1. The next card seems to clearly represent the Grimm's fairy tale of the Frog King, one that was referenced in Shrek 2 and 3. In the story, the king, or the prince, is turned into a frog by some sort of curse, and is turned back into a human, not when the princess kisses him, as most modern tellings have it, but rather when the princess throws the frog against the wall in disgust. I hope that this card is a black-green creature card that is a 1/1 or a 2/2 and gains a +1/+1 counter when thrown against creatures bigger than it. Or it could be a flip card. I don't know, they probably aren't bringing back flip cards, but I can hope. Where the creature would die, transform it instead, and it turns into a white king card. The next card is one that stumped me for the longest time. This is where I get the idea that they might be doing a gender/race swapped King Arthur story. The circles all over the place make me think of the Round Table, and the circle is often used in relation to King Arthur. Then there is Excalibur in her hand, which looks incredible, even though it is a different card than what we see later with the Lady in the Lake. Plus the fact that this looks like a queen, even with the royal chairs being in the background of this art. Now, why Queen Aretha? Well, it kind of looks like Aretha Franklin, just a little bit. Maybe it's Wizards' way of including an icon in a bit of a pun, as we all know they are bound to do. This card is clearly white and will be a legendary creature of some sort, most likely rare but possibly even mythic. She will be a 3/3 with vigilance and chivalry. The next bit of art is one of the mythic land cards that I talked about in my top 10. It very clearly is representing the gingerbread house from the story of Hansel and Gretel. Now, what this card would do was it would be a basic land card that at any time you could pay 6 to pull out both Hansel and Gretel, who would be twin cards similar to Rowan and Will. They would come out and be able to attack right away with haste based on the way this card would work. And the next card is similar to it. It very clearly shows the land of Cinderella. This could be Prince Charming's castle. It seems to be an island, and it would be 4 cost in order to get out Cinderella. And the next card is another one that I spent far too long searching for a Grimm's fairy tale that matches, or something from the story of King Arthur. And if anything, this might be from the story of King Arthur. What I think it is I think this is another land card that does something, but not one of the mythic lands. Specifically because I couldn't match a story to it, I didn't want to make it one of the mythic lands. And so I believe that this is just a colorless land that has a storybook ability that allows you to make a copy of another creature with none of its activated abilities. The next card has so many implications. A creature baked into a pie. But honestly, when I looked at it, I couldn't find any story that really matched it until I found the Grimm's fairy tale of the juniper tree. Now, in this story, it's very dark, and I don't want to go into all the details. I just recommend look it up and be prepared to be disgusted a little bit, because it is about a mother who basically kills her son and then feeds him to the father and makes the father think that he was the one who did it. So, yay for that. What is this card? I honestly don't know. It might be a black card, sorcery, and it does removal. The next bit of art was one of the easiest for me to figure out. Cinderella's literally in the background. You can see the evil stepmother there holding Lucifer, or at least that was the name of the cat within the Disney movie. The cat didn't actually exist in the original story, but this is clearly the evil stepmother. I believe that she will be a black-blue creature card with 2/3 with just some flavor text on her. The next card, I couldn't find anything that referenced this card. I searched for probably a good 2 hours to find a story that would match this card where a lady is pulling somebody from stone, and it doesn't seem to match any story. I mean, the closest I could find is possibly a gender swap Sleeping Beauty, but in that story, she didn't turn to stone, she just fell asleep. So I'm not really sure what this is, but I believe that the card is going to be green-white card with some sort of life gain on it. And now we get to the card that shows Excalibur for the first time, where we can definitively say that it's Excalibur. This is the Lady in the Lake, a very clear image of one of the Arthurian legends, where Arthur goes and meets with the siren in a lake, and after a bit of coercing, eventually he gets Excalibur, which allows him to be king. What does this card do? Well, I believe that it's going to be a black-blue creature card with Excalibur for Excalibur the sword. I'm going to move really quickly through these next 5 cards. Each of these are basic lands, and they are all representative of at least one story. The mountain is from Mount Simile. The swamp is from Snow White, which is interesting because it seems to have a connection to an old card and may be a reprint of Grove of the Burn Willows. The third card is from Sleeping Beauty, and it is the Plains. The island seems to be something Arthurian. I couldn't match it to any other story. And then the final card, the Forest, is from Hansel and Gretel, which we can tell because of the legendary land card. They seem very similar. The next bit of art is not actually depicting a Grimm's fairy tale. Now, I didn't expect them to select only from Grimm's fairy tales, but when Mark Rosewater said that, it was my first point of reference. And so I was really disheartened when I couldn't find a story about a gingerbread man in Grimm's fairy tales. But there is a very famous poem that most people know. Run, run, run as fast you can. You can't catch me, I'm the gingerbread man. That story actually involves him escaping from a bunch of people trying to eat him until a fox outsmarts him and kills him in the end. This card is probably going to be a black-green creature card. It'll be just a small 1/1 creature with haste. Now the next card is really interesting because it clearly represents the Little Mermaid, but doesn't actually match any of the stories. The original story was written by Hans Christian Andersen and involves a mermaid who wants to be a human so bad that she goes to a witch and basically gets convinced to chop her fins in half, and she lives in pain until the moment that she dies. It's a horrid, horrid story. And of course we all know The Little Mermaid, which is the Disney-fied version of it, where she gets to live out a happily ever after and her only punishment is losing her voice. This seems to be a middle ground between those two stories. A dark version of The Little Mermaid, but not one where she literally cuts her tail in half, and not one where she just loses her voice. It seems like she's just trapped looking at this mermaidic version of herself. So what does this card do? Well, I think that it's going to be a high cost card, but it will exile a creature unless its user pays 5 life. The next card I don't need to talk on too much. It's clearly from Snow White. It depicts the witch holding the apple and, surprisingly, dwarf's arms popping out of her coat. What does the card do? Well, I think that this card is just going to damage a target player for 3 damage. That makes my life easier. The final 2 cards are a little bit different because the first one I don't think is actually going to be a card. I think it's stylized in order to show off what this set is going to be about. Kind of that mythical fairy tale vibe with Arthurian aspects to it. The knight is clearly part of Arthur's kingdom, but there's a bunch of other stuff that seems to show up here. You can see a sword that looks similar to Excalibur. It looks like he's holding the poison apple from the Snow White story. And there seems to be just so many things that bring this together. But the reason I don't think that this is actually going to be a card is because of the Magic the Gathering symbol in the center. I feel like this is going to be used for promotional materials, and that's it. And the last card, well, it's Little Red Riding Rowan. Sadly, I can't speculate on this card as her actual Planeswalker card has been revealed. They released a French translation of the card, and sadly that leak made it so that I can't speculate on who this is going to be because I saw it and now I can't predict. The final section that I have is just things that I hope to see in the Throne of Eldraine set. I truthfully am looking forward to this set and believe that Wizards of the Coast is going to knock it out of the park. The art has been incredible that they've shown us already. And so here are some of my thoughts of what might be coming. I think it would be really cool if we saw a card based on Merlin or Rumpelstiltskin, or better yet, a card based on the story of Clever Elsie. All 3 of these are some of my favorites within Arthurian legend as well as Grimm's fairy tales. They're incredible aspects that you could bring into the world of Magic the Gathering, and you could create some pretty cool cards out of them. I also think that a bunch of elves would be pretty cool based on the story of the elves within the Grimm's fairy tales. And honestly, a raven would be nice too. I really hope they're not going to overdo the masterpiece type cards, the full art and the absolutely beautiful looking stuff. I know that they're releasing the collector's edition packs that are going to have more of these, but I really hope that they don't overdo it. Another card I would love to see is a griffin based on the Grimm's fairy tale of the same name. I think a really cool card would be a 2020 card that has chivalry, so that you have this massive beast, but if somehow they sneak by enough damage to kill you, you could sacrifice it and stop that damage. And my final prediction, which honestly I don't believe is actually going to happen, is something that I've already brought up. The legendary lands that I talked of before. Now, I've heard rumor, and I haven't actually read it myself, but I've heard rumor that within Throne of Eldraine, at least within the plane of Eldraine, there are going to be 5 different realms, which seems to point even more towards what I was thinking. The fact that there's going to be 5 legendary lands, 1 for each color. And I really hope that they do something like this, because I love those cards that seem to match each other or have a connection through what they are. And having 5 legendary lands would be really cool to have in my collection. I am so excited for the Throne of Eldraine set. I think that there's so many incredible things to come from this, and I'm hoping, beyond all hope, that I'm right with at least one of my predictions. Once the set is out, I'm going to do a video revisiting this video, and I'm going to go through some of my predictions. I'm going to see what I was right with and what I was wrong with, and I'm going to give myself a score from 1 to 10 on how correct I was. And I'm going to do this with any set that comes out. I'm going to make these wild speculations, seeing how many of them I get right. And you know what? I'm expecting 1% to be right, if any. But if any of them are, I'm going to freak out, because I've made some pretty absolute bonkers predictions. And who knows? They might do it. I hope that you really enjoyed this video. It's something new, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to write the script for it and to prepare it, but I hope it's something that you liked. I'm trying to make it a little bit more conversational, and so I'm allowing some of my idiosyncrasies and mess-ups to come through. It's just because I'm doing this more off the cuff. I have a script, but I'm not following it exactly. The script is just my basic thoughts and ideas of what I think are coming in this set. And so I hope that you like this video, even if there are a few mistakes throughout. And who knows, as I continue doing this, I'm probably going to get better with just talking to the ether. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please subscribe, leave a like on this video, and you know the deal by now. Seek on.